Anniversaries are supposed to be about celebrating love, reminiscing about the good times, and maybe sharing a bottle of overpriced wine. What they're not supposed to be about is discovering your spouse is an aspiring contestant for worst partner ever. But, hey, life has a funny way of keeping you humble. It all started with a ring. It was our 10th anniversary, and Julia, my beautiful, witty, occasionally terrifying wife, sat across from me at a candlelit dinner. The setting was perfect. The steak was medium rare, just like I liked it. The wine was the kind that makes you feel important for no reason. Then, she pulled out a small velvet box. "Happy anniversary, Alex," she said, her smile wide and slightly nervous. I wasn't expecting a gift. We'd agreed on a no big presents policy, mainly because I'd already blown half our budget on an expensive weekend getaway. So, when she slid the box across the table, my first thought was, she's breaking the rules. My second thought was, I should have gotten her a gift. Inside was a sleek, silver ring. Elegant. Simple. My kind of style. "Wow," I said, slipping it onto my finger. "It's perfect." And it was, until it wasn't. Later that evening, while Julia was brushing her teeth, I sat on the couch, admiring the ring. I noticed a faint engraving on the inside, our wedding date. Nice touch. But as I turned it to get a better look, something else caught my eye. There was a second line of text. I squinted, bringing the ring closer to my face. "For Celine, forever." Celine? My first thought, must be a typo. My second thought, why would Julia misspell her own name? My third thought, who the hell is Celine? Julia walked in, toweling off her hair, oblivious to the existential crisis brewing on our couch. "You like it?" she asked, flashing me a warm smile. I forced a grin, holding up my hand. "Love it. You really outdid yourself." She beamed, kissed my cheek, and headed to bed, leaving me alone with the ring, the engraving, and a growing pit in my stomach. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the name Celine floated through my mind like some ominous specter. Was it a mistake? A coincidence? Or something worse? By morning, I had a plan. Step 1, don't panic. Step 2, get answers. Step 3, try not to lose my mind in the process. Little did I know, this ring was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with one mission, to figure out who, or what, Celine was. My first theory, naturally, was that it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe the jeweler mixed up the order. Maybe Julia had borrowed a ring from someone named Celine and forgotten to swap it back. Maybe aliens. Okay, the last one was a stretch, but I was desperate for an explanation that didn't involve my wife secretly living a double life. Julia was already gone when I stumbled into the kitchen. A sticky note on the fridge read, "Morning, love. Running errands. Be back later. Hugs and kisses." Her handwriting was annoyingly cheerful, given the existential dread I was feeling. I started with the ring. I mean, if you find a weird engraving on a gift, the logical thing to do is figure out where it came from. Julia wasn't exactly the Etsy type, so I ruled out anything handmade. No, this was polished and expensive. Classic Julia, practical on the surface, but with just enough flair to make me feel like I was worth the splurge. I flipped open my laptop, ready to do some good old-fashioned detective work. Step 1, search for the jeweler. The box the ring came in had a logo on the inside, Parker & Company. Jewelers. A quick Google search pulled up their website, complete with glowing reviews and a tagline that read, "Timeless elegance for every occasion." Timeless elegance? Sure. Engraving another woman's name on my ring? Less elegant. I called the store, hoping for answers. "Parker & Company, this is Linda speaking. How can I help you?" "Hi, Linda," I said, trying to sound calm and not like a man teetering on the edge of a breakdown. "I recently received a ring as a gift from your store. I was wondering if you could tell me anything about the order." "Of course. Do you have the receipt? Crap. No, but I have the engraving. Great. What does it say? I hesitated, feeling like a complete idiot. It says, for Celine, forever. There was a pause, and I swear I heard her typing furiously. Oh, yes, Linda said after a moment. That was part of a custom order placed by Alex Caldwell. My heart sank. Sorry, can you repeat that? It was ordered by Alex Caldwell. 2 rings, both custom engraved. 2 rings. My mind raced as I hung up. 2 rings? One for me and one for Celine? Step 2, the confrontation. Almost. By the time Julia came home, I'd worked myself into a full-blown spiral. I couldn't stop picturing her slipping another ring onto some mystery woman's finger, whispering sweet nothings like some discount Casanova. Hey, she said, walking in with a bag of groceries. You okay? You look tense. Oh, I'm great, I said, forcing a tight smile. Just had a lot on my mind. She frowned, setting the groceries on the counter. Anything you want to talk about? I considered confronting her right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, genuine, almost innocent. Or maybe it was the fact that I didn't have a solid plan beyond shout until she cracks. No, I said finally. Nothing important. Her smile returned, and I hated how relieved she looked. Step 3, follow the breadcrumbs. That night, while Julia slept, I went through her things. I know, snooping is a terrible idea. But desperate times, right? Her purse held nothing incriminating. Her laptop? Locked. But her calendar, sitting on the kitchen counter, was wide open. I scanned the entries, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Most of it was standard stuff, work meetings, lunch with friends, a dentist appointment. But one entry caught my eye, lunch with S. Who the hell is S? The next morning, I casually asked about her plans. Anything exciting on your calendar today? I asked over coffee, trying not to sound like I was interrogating her. She shook her head. Not really. Just the usual. Lunch? I pressed. Oh, just a quick bite with an old friend, she said, her tone breezy. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. And just like that, my plan was set. Step 4, the stakeout. At noon, I parked my car across from the cafe listed in her calendar. Julia arrived right on time, looking effortlessly put together as usual. A few minutes later, a tall, elegant woman walked in and joined her. They hugged, and Julia's face lit up in a way that made my stomach twist. Was this Celine? They sat by the window, their conversation animated. Julia gestured to her ring at one point, and the woman smiled. I watched, my mind racing. Was this proof? A misunderstanding? Or just the beginning of a much bigger problem? One thing was certain, this wasn't over. Sitting in my car across from the cafe, I felt like a detective in a bad movie. All I needed was a trench coat, a fedora, and a flask of whiskey to complete the cliché. Instead, I had a half-empty coffee cup and a growing pit in my stomach as I watched Julia and her mystery woman laughing and chatting like old friends. Was this Celine? The name engraved on my ring, the name that had haunted me for days? The woman was tall, poised, and irritatingly beautiful. She had one of those effortless looks that screamed I wake up flawless. Her smile was wide and genuine, the kind that could charm anyone, even my wife, apparently. I debated my next move. Storm in and demand answers? Wait and hope Julia slipped up later? Or sit here, spiraling into madness? Option 1-1. I walked into the cafe, feigning casual confidence while my heart pounded like a drum solo. Julia didn't notice me at first, too engrossed in whatever Celine was saying. But when I reached their table, her eyes widened, and she froze mid-sip of her latte. Alex, she said, her voice high-pitched and nervous. What are you doing here? Oh, I said, pulling out the chair across from her. Just thought I'd grab a coffee. And maybe meet your friend. The word friend came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Celine turned to me, her expression curious but calm. You must be Alex, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Julia's told me so much about you. Funny, I said, forcing a smile. She hasn't mentioned you at all. Julia's face turned red, and she quickly set down her cup. Alex, this isn't. Isn't what? I interrupted, leaning back in my chair. What it looks like. Because I have to tell you, Julia, it looks a hell of a lot like something I should know about. Celine raised an eyebrow, glancing between us. Should I go? She asked, her tone casual, like she wasn't the possible homewrecker at the center of my unraveling life. No, I said firmly. Stay. I'd love to hear about how you two know each other. Julia shot Celine a desperate look, but Celine didn't seem fazed. If anything, she looked amused. We met at the gym, Celine said, her tone light. A few months ago. Julia and I hit it off right away. At the gym, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Is that where all this hitting it off happened? Alex, stop, Julia said, her voice trembling. No, I said, my voice cold. I want to know. I want to know why my wife's anniversary gift has her name engraved on it. Celine blinked, clearly caught off guard. Wait, what? Don't play dumb, I snapped, pulling off the ring and slamming it on the table. It says, for Celine, forever. Care to explain that? For the first time, Celine looked genuinely confused. She picked up the ring, examining the engraving, before turning to Julia. Julia, she said slowly, what's going on? Julia buried her face in her hands, mumbling something I couldn't make out. What was that? I asked, my tone sharp. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. It's not what you think, she said, her voice shaking. Then what is it? I demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you had a ring engraved for your girlfriend and accidentally gave it to your husband. Celine gasped, leaning back in her chair. Girlfriend? Julia, is he serious? It's not like that. Julia said, her voice desperate. Celine, I swear, it's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? Celine asked, her eyes narrowing. Because now I'm wondering why my name is on your husband's ring. The table descended into chaos, with Julia trying to explain herself while Celine and I both demanded answers. Finally, Julia blurted out, it was a mistake, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen. What mistake? I snapped. Julia hesitated, her hands trembling. I ordered 2 rings. One for you, and one for Celine. But the engravings got mixed up, and I didn't realize it until it was too late. The words hung in the air like a grenade waiting to explode. You ordered a ring for her? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't like that, Julia said quickly. She's just a friend. Just a friend? Celine repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. That's news to me. For a moment, the three of us sat in stunned silence. Then, Celine stood, throwing her napkin on the table. I can't believe this, she said, glaring at Julia. I thought we had something real. Celine, wait, Julia started, but Celine was already heading for the door. I turned to Julia, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. So, I said, my voice cold. How long has this been going on? It's not what you think, she said, tears streaming down her face. No, I said, standing. It's worse. As I walked out of the cafe, the weight of the ring in my pocket felt heavier than ever. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked out of that cafe feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Twice. The name Celine repeated in my head like a bad pop song I couldn't get rid of. My wife, my Julia, had ordered matching rings, one for me and one for her. She tried to pass it off as a mistake, but there was no mistaking the look in Celine's eyes when she stormed out. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal wrapped up in excuses. When I got home, Julia was already there, waiting for me in the living room. She looked small, curled up on the couch with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were red and puffy, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the engraving, the texts, the way Celine had looked at her like they shared something I wasn't part of. I closed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet house. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know." I didn't sit down. Instead, I paced the room, my thoughts racing faster than I could speak. "How long, Julia?" I asked finally, stopping to face her. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. "You keep saying that, but it sure as hell looks like it was exactly like that." "It was complicated," she said, her voice trembling. "Try me," I said, crossing my arms. "I'd love to hear how complicating our marriage with someone else makes sense." She flinched, tears welling in her eyes again. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Celine and I met at the gym, and we just connected." She understood me in ways I didn't even realize I needed. "Connected?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Is that what we're calling it now? Connecting?" "It wasn't physical," she blurted out. "Not like that. We were just close." She was a friend, someone I could talk to about things I couldn't talk to you about. That hit me harder than I expected. "Things you couldn't talk to me about?" I said, my voice softer now. "Like what, Julia? What couldn't you tell me?" She looked up at me, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "I don't know." I felt invisible. Like we were just going through the motions, and I didn't know how to reach you. I stared at her, my anger faltering for a moment. "I didn't want to hurt you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I just wanted to feel seen." For a second, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the ring. "You wanted to feel seen?" I said bitterly. "So you engraved her name on a ring and gave it to me? What was that, some kind of sick joke?" Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. "I don't know. I made a mistake, okay? I ordered the rings at the same time, and when they came back wrong, I panicked. I thought I could fix it." "Fix it?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You thought you could fix giving your girlfriend's ring to your husband? Do you hear yourself right now?" The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Alex, please. I know I messed up, but I love you. You have to believe that." I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "Do you love her?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake." "Mistakes don't last for months," I said coldly. I stood there, the space between us feeling like a chasm. For 10 years, I'd built my life around this woman, trusted her, loved her. And now, it all felt like a lie. "I can't do this," I said finally, my voice breaking. "Alex, wait," she said, standing up. "Please, we can fix this. We can go to therapy, start over." "Start over?" I interrupted. "You don't start over from this, Julia. You start away from this." Her face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. But I couldn't stay to comfort her. Not now. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice desperate. "Anywhere but here," I said without looking back. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but it felt better than the suffocating weight of our house. I walked aimlessly, my mind racing. This wasn't just a crack in our marriage. This was a wrecking ball, and I didn't know if there was anything left to save. The next morning, I woke up on my brother's couch, staring at the popcorn ceiling like it might hold the answers to my shattered life. It didn't. But the buzzing phone on the coffee table? That had plenty to say. 15 missed calls from Julia. 12 texts. Alex, please come home. We can talk. I love you. Don't throw this away. I'm sorry. Sorry. Right. She was sorry now that I'd caught her. That was about as comforting as a band-aid on a bullet wound. I silenced my phone and leaned back, staring at the ceiling again. My brother, Chris, wandered into the living room, still half asleep. You look like hell, he said, dropping onto the recliner with a mug of coffee. Feel worse, I muttered, rubbing my face. What's the plan? I stared at him, the question hanging in the air. What was the plan? Go home and pretend everything was fine? Forgive Julia and spend the rest of my life wondering if she was sneaking around again? Or walk away from a decade of memories and start over? By noon, I'd made my decision. I called Julia once. She picked up on the first ring. Alex, she said, her voice trembling. Thank God. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Meet me at the house, I said, ignoring her question. We need to talk. She hesitated. Okay. I'll be there. When I walked into the house, it felt different. Like a museum exhibit of a life I didn't belong to anymore. The photos on the walls, the books on the shelves, even the throw pillows on the couch, they all felt like someone else's story. Julia was waiting for me in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She looked tired, her eyes red and puffy, but she straightened when she saw me. Alex, she began, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. Just, don't. I sat across from her, my hands resting on the table. I've thought about this, I said, my voice steady. And I've come to a conclusion. She leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. Alex, we can fix this. I know we can. No, we can't, I said, cutting her off. Julia, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, to bring someone else into our marriage. And I can't come back from that. Her face crumpled, and tears streamed down her cheeks. I was lonely, she whispered. I felt like we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to reach you. You should have tried harder, I said quietly. You should have told me. Instead, you found someone else. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening. I don't hate you, I said finally. But I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's no marriage. Alex, please, she sobbed. Don't do this. Don't throw us away. I stood, the weight of my decision settling over me like a heavy coat. You already did. I packed my things that afternoon. Julia begged me to stay, but her words felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. When I finally walked out the door, the only thing I took with me was my dignity. A month later, I signed the divorce papers. Julia didn't fight it, whether out of guilt or exhaustion, I didn't know. Chris let me crash on his couch until I found a place of my own. It wasn't much, just a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and a view of a parking lot, but it was mine. One evening, I sat on the balcony, a beer in hand, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. I hope you're okay. I miss you. I stared at it for a moment before deleting it. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I believed I could be. Because sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to let go of the people who hurt you. Moving on is messy. It's not like in the movies, where the heartbroken hero burns old photos, gets a haircut, and suddenly discovers their best self. No, moving on is staring at blank walls in your new apartment, wondering if you made the right choice. It's ordering takeout for one and realizing you've forgotten what you actually like because you always just ate whatever she wanted. But little by little, I started to piece things together. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I packed away the last of the keepsakes from my life with Julia. The wedding album went into storage. The ring, I couldn't bring myself to look at it, was sold to a pawn shop for far less than it was worth. It felt good, like shedding a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. Chris came over that weekend, bringing beer and pizza like some kind of divorced guy starter kit. "So," he said, leaning back on my couch. "What's next?" I laughed, taking a swig of my beer. "What's next?" "I don't know, man. Figuring out how to be single at 35? That's a start." "Well," he said with a smirk, "just don't download any dating apps yet. Those things are a jungle." It wasn't a grand epiphany or a Hollywood-style moment that started to shift things for me. It was a random Tuesday at the coffee shop down the street. I was sitting at my usual corner table, nursing a cup of black coffee and pretending to be interested in a book I wasn't really reading, when a woman stumbled in, juggling a laptop bag, a purse, and a drink carrier. "Hey, could you," she started, nodding toward the door. I jumped up, holding the door open as she scrambled inside, spilling only half of her latte in the process. "Thanks," she said, flashing me an embarrassed smile. "I'm not usually this much of a disaster." "No problem," I said, smiling back. "Everyone's a disaster on Tuesdays." She laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made me feel lighter than I had in months. We ended up sharing a table that morning, her working on some kind of graphic design project and me pretending I wasn't just enjoying the conversation. Her name was Emma. She had a sharp wit, a quick smile, and a knack for making me forget why I'd come to the coffee shop in the first place. When she left, she scribbled her number on a napkin. "In case you ever need help surviving another Tuesday," she said with a wink. I watched her go, the napkin feeling like a lifeline in my hand. A week later, Julia texted me again. "Hey, I know this is probably a bad idea, but I miss you. Can we talk?" For the first time, I didn't feel the familiar pang of anger or sadness. I didn't feel anything at all. I deleted the message without responding. Emma and I started meeting at the coffee shop more often. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or a dramatic rebound, it was something simple, something real. One evening, as we sat on my tiny apartment balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me and said, "You're different from most guys I've met. Like, you've been through something, but it didn't break you." I thought about that for a moment, staring at the last rays of sunlight. "Yeah," I said finally. "I guess it didn't. Moving on wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I was just me. And that was enough." Subscribe to never miss a new story and discover even more captivating tales.